Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the AI and innovation stage first thing this morning. Super quick bits of housekeeping. Obviously, exit is on the side there, but you'll also notice that you've got some very fetching headphones. It won't be too bad at the moment, but as more people start coming in, you might find it gets a little bit loud, so you may want to pop those on to listen to our fantastic panel who are going to be kicking us off this morning. So very appropriately for this year's theme at MadFest, we're going to be looking at PR is boring, stop it. So B2B PR is boring, dull and pointless. If that's your view, you should be thinking again. So it can be the most creative, the most dynamic, and the most effective tool that you have at your disposal. So I'd love to welcome to the stage Justin Pearse, who is the editor of New Digital Age, Lydia Oakes, the MD at Bluestripe Communications, and no relation, but Paul Wright, the head of advertising international at Uber as well. So if we can give a big round of applause as they kick off this morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. As Amy said, I'm Justin Pearse. I'm the editor of New Digital Age, which is published by Bluestripe Group, which also owns the industry's leading PR agency, headed up by Lydia. Yesterday, I interviewed Richard Ayoade on the main stage, and this is far more exciting. This is going to be a good morning. I'm talking about B2B PR, and I've been in B2B journalism all my life. Lydia's been in B2B PR all her life, and Paul's had exposure to this all his life. So we're going to talk a bit about how B2B PR, what it is, and how it can be more effective. And it's often sort of painted as the poorer cousin of B2C, which I think is totally untrue. So let's kick off. My first question is, can B2B PR be as good as B2C? And really the question is, does it need to be?
I think definitely it can be. I think we have a perhaps staid idea of what B2B PR is. And we might focus purely on media relations. PR is so much more than that. It encompasses everything from your brand reputation, stakeholder engagement across your talent, your prospects, your new business, your partners. So I think it goes far beyond what we might traditionally think. It encompasses, presences at shows like this. So I think it can be just as exciting as B2C and just as important. And I think sometimes B2C, perhaps because it impacts every individual in this room, we are more aware of it in some ways. And therefore, it gets the headlines. But I think B2B is what makes, companies, organisations that we all represent, it's what makes them grow and build and succeed.
We'll dig into that. What is B2B PR exactly? I think you're right. I think it's confusing. It's not what people think. It's not just media relations. I mean, Paul, B2B PR is boring. Is the thesis? What do you think?
No.
Moving on.
I mean, I think, so in my career, I've used a lot of PR agencies for B2B. And I think it's changed a lot, actually, because when I first did it, it was stick a logo somewhere, send a press release out, and someone would write about it. It was really relatively straightforward. These days, I think it's much more complex, but and by definition, less boring, because in order to get that attention, and we were on the stage yesterday talking about attention. Attention is very important in PR as well. Getting attention is critical, and making it interesting is going to make the difference. Because I think if you talk to journalists and people who PR agencies interact with, they are inundated with stuff. A lot of that stuff is probably not going to resonate with them unless they have a bit of a personal collection, unless it's humanized and all the other stuff. Because, particularly with AI coming, we're going to end up with even more stuff, I would imagine. So we've got an abundance of things happening and then conversations happening, but then you've got to make it stand out. And for an increasing number of businesses, ourselves included, B2B PR is logged in with our B2C communications as well. So it's not like it's separated on its own. So we have to make sure that whatever we do in all sorts of areas links up to our consumer-facing and to our business-facing audience. So we can't, I think separating it out sometimes loses a little bit of point there, because it just becomes a sort of, in some businesses I've seen it becomes a little bit of a oh, we just do that because we need to get a press release out to a particular publication, not necessarily that it's linked into a wider thing for the brand.
What do you think B2B PR can learn from B2C? And what I always find interesting is in awards, the B2C category is huge and the results are huge because, as you say, Lyd, it's reaching the whole population, whereas the B2B categories are much smaller, and comparing the two is almost impossible. But there must be something that B2B can learn from its B2C cousin.
I think that one of the things that B2B can learn is fun. B2B PR can be fun. I think, going back to what Paul said about the earlier days when it was, issuing a press release about a product launch, there was not a lot of fun in that. But I think nowadays it's thinking beyond that. The press release is one tool, one small tool in the toolkit for public relations. And I think it's about understanding that attention point as well. Is how are you getting the attention of that journalist? How are you getting the attention of that stakeholder? That partner that you want to get in front of. Is that through a press release? Maybe, but actually there's so many other ways that you can be reaching them, whether that's through, inviting them to an event like this, or whether it's engaging with them in multiple other ways. There are, you can bring that fun element as well. So I think fun is something that maybe you don't automatically think of when you think of B2B PR, but it shouldn't be underestimated that the value of humour, the value of thinking creatively beyond the normal kind of tactics as well. Ultimately we're all dealing with individuals. The fact that we are employees or we are buyers on behalf of a company, we still want that sense of engagement and something that's going to keep our interest. So I think the fun element of what you can see across B2C is something we should be thinking of in B2B.
What about building relationships with journalists? I mean, when I started off 25 years ago, it was a different place, and there were lots of titles filled with lots of journalists, and nowadays the titles are under pressure. We're seeing cuts all the time. We saw some a few weeks ago, some of our very good friends, so publications have less staff doing more. I guess back to the old days, when I was young, I wouldn't let my reporters be in the office, be out meeting people, and now that's a very different world. I mean, how important, Paul, do you see building relationships with key journalists? And yes, B2B PR is not just about media relations, but...
I think you have to try and make it work. I mean, it's tough to see them, but the personal connection. There's two points to this. I think one is fun and one is personal connection, because I think that's where you can get through the press release, the AI press release, and the boringness, I guess, of it. You just have to. I mean, we work very hard with our relationships across the globe in terms of all the journos we work with, and for someone like me who's a commercial person, it's a lot of time to do, but it's very important for the business to get the key messages out when we need to. And I think it just gets through it gives context to everything. And I think, journalists appreciate it if they can really talk to someone rather than talk at a standardized press release, because they want to get to the human side of it. And that's important. But it does take time, and it is tougher in this world now.
I think the other thing kind of that we were talking about in terms of B2B versus B2C is that, in B2C, a lot of it is around volume in the right places, but it is volume of coverage. And I think that, when we're looking at B2B, having, worked with team members who have moved across from B2C into B2B working with us, what they then kind of learn is that it's about the quality of the coverage, not necessarily the quantity, because the audience that you're looking for is much more targeted. It might be it's 100 CMOs that you're actually interested in reaching, because those are the people that are going to help you to drive your business forward. And reaching hundreds of thousands or millions is not necessarily going to hit those 100. So I think that's another difference with B2B is understanding, and then it is about building those journalist relationships. Because when you know that actually you're working with 50 publications across kind of multiple sectors, it's knowing those individual journalists and building those relationships and picking up the phone I think we've got out of the habit a bit of that with the pandemic. And journalists will answer the phone if you call them, and they like that personal interaction, and they like the fact you're not an AI-generated voice. So I think that, events like this, it's about that personal connection. So understanding that journalists are time poor, understanding that attention, to get their attention, you need to be relevant, and not spamming them. And you get to the stage where you have their mobile number. They respond because they know that what you're going to be offering them is of interest to them, and it's going to be offered in a timely fashion, and it's going to be opinionated. Having opinions is so important. So that's going to help you to get that cut through, and engage with those journalists.
We mentioned Madfest. Let's talk about Madfest. You mentioned this earlier, I think, but I think PR sometimes is viewed as media relations, as you're saying, Lydia, press releases, and I think it's much more than that, especially today. So what role do shows like Madfest or Cannes Lion or the Future Brands, what role do they play in PR today? And again, how does that make the PR less boring?
I mean, from our point of view, we go to all these events as a participant, as we are here, as we were in Cannes. And then I think we use those setups as platforms to do more. Now, when we get to Cannes, we will talk to journalists and everything. We also do fun things, which is the one I'm always most proud of is the fact that the team came up with this idea of handing out pizzas next to the Gutter Bar. Now, for those of you who've been to Cannes, the Gutter Bar is a bar that, not the most salubrious bar in the whole...
Bad things happen.
Bad things happen, right. But it's a bar that everyone goes to after they've done everything else. It runs from about 11 o'clock onwards through the night. And there's a pizza bar next to it called Pizza Vesuvio, which has been there for many years. And we took it over this year and last year, actually, and we're giving out free pizzas in branded boxes. But it worked really well. Everyone comes up to us, and I have people come up today and say, yesterday, and say, I really love your pizza. Because it's one of those things, because I think this is going back to this human point. And also being on brand, that message was very much Uber Eats delivers pizzas. That's one of the things we do. And we deliver it to people at the time when they need it. It doesn't cost them anything. It worked really well, and it gives some nice branding. And I think in a place like Cannes, where there is a lot of branding everywhere, probably so much branding, it was trying to work out whether you're actually in the same city. It was difficult to see. That type of thing has a much greater cut through than maybe just sticking a logo up. So I think we tend to go, right, well, what's on brand for Uber as a business? And then how do we make that work? As opposed to go to shows and go, here's a big logo and a stand, can we make that work? Because that's a bit harder, in our view.
Yeah, I mean, I think shows like Madfest, like Cannes Lions, and Cannes Lions Fringe is really what we're talking about rather than Cannes Lions itself. I think they have a massive role to play. I think, and I think the importance is that living that brand and making it relevant. They are an opportunity to have that face-to-face time with journalists as well. I think we've got 35 trade journalists signed up across the week this week. So, they will be here from across kind of campaign, Digiday, titles like that, as well as some of the retail media titles as well. So that is an opportunity for you to have, face-to-face conversations with journalists, get to know them a bit more. But also, it's an opportunity to interact with your prospects and with future employees as well. So I think, we're in a very digitally focused world now. Everything is, online, but personal relationships still are so important. And this is one of those opportunities to create those personal relationships. People buy from people, ultimately.
Well, what about another strand in sort of your toolkit, both of you, which is clients' owned media? So as well as trade shows and the press and all these other elements, I guess within modern B2B PR sits clients' own media, and what can be done with that? Do you have got a view on that? Yeah,
I mean, we work with a number of clients for whom we will be supporting their social channels, supporting their blogs. Owned media has a really important place, place to pay or position to have in your communications. We see a lot of kind of combinations of paid, earned, shared and owned, so the kind of peso model, which has become much more important, and also the tools that you can use are much more available nowadays. So when paid media has its place. I prefer to go down the earned route first always, but it also has an opportunity to prolong a campaign, for example. Shared media is looking at how your partners, for example, you can collaborate with and share opportunities. And the own side is can be really exciting. It can also give you that opportunity to delve much more deeply into a topic than you might do through earned coverage. And really express your opinion and your point of view. And I think it doesn't have to just sit within your blog or your socials. For a client, News UK, we help them to develop a publication called The Map, which helped them to reframe how they wanted to be seen within the industry. And that was an online publication. So there are different ways to create owned media as well. But yeah, absolutely, it has a place to play, and an important one.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to, we're lucky because we have a brand that people recognise and a brand a lot of people use, so that helps. But the own media part of it is always very important. And if you take an Uber to and from MadFest at the moment, you will see Uber ads running. The best way of demonstrating how the ad product works is actually to put an ad in the product when it's an event like this. We do the same in Cannes. So I think we see that as a very easy way to build the business. And when we first started doing it, and we do it at a lot of events and many places, first started doing it, became really successful, to the extent actually we now have demand from advertisers wanting to do the same for the same events. I mean, we could probably sell Cannes out 3 times over if we wanted to, but we use it for ourselves. So it's I think the own media thing, great for us because it's just perfect. It's very simple. It doesn't require too much, but it has made a big difference in people's recognition and understanding of our product, and that's been important. And then obviously everything else we do, if it links it back into what we do with Uber Eats and ice cream here and pizzas in Cannes, that works as well. But that's sort of an own media extension, I suppose.
But what about, boring or not, there's also the issue often of proving the value of PR internally to stakeholders that may not even understand it. They may think it's boring, they just don't know what PR is. So how do you convince internal stakeholders of the value of PR, be that the marketing director, the CMO, the CEO, whoever?
And when we talk to clients and prospects a lot about this, and it's always been kind of recognised that advertising, you can see the ROI, you can measure it. We're all in this business. We know about all the measurement techniques. PR has a less tangible quality to it. I think there will be AI tools coming down the line that may try to supplement the current tools to measurement. You can look at reach. You can look at share of voice. Share of voice is great, but it's a very blunt tool. You can't control what your competitors are doing that quarter. You don't, if they're making an acquisition, that's going to get a flurry of news coverage, and suddenly your metrics are down. So it's about really at the start of a relationship with the client, discussing what metrics are going to matter to them. And how they want those delivered. We've also done brand awareness surveys with clients at the beginning of an engagement and then 6 monthly. That's another way of doing it. So there's lots of different forms. It's still one of the harder things to prove because there are so many touch points as well. So, a prospect can see you shortlisted for an award entry. They can see you at MadFest. They can then get a contact from a salesperson in your team. They can then read a piece of coverage. Which of those is actually the one that's tipped them over into the purchase consideration? It's hard to identify. But that without any of that brand awareness, are they going to take the call from the salesperson? So it's about communicating that to those internal decision makers, that actually awareness, at the top of the funnel, the awareness will help to actually drive that consideration lower down. And there's lots of things that PR can do to help to support that. But the measurement one is always one that's a bit of a bugbear.
I mean, Paul, Lydia talks about metrics that matter, and yesterday I saw you on the main stage with hundreds of metrics. I guess that's what supports you in advertising, as there's so many metrics. When it comes to PR, how do you prove the value to your
Well, I think a little sort of background to our sort of philosophy. So when we first launched, one of the challenges we recognized is that with us coming into a market, there's a lot of dominant platforms and there's a lot of choice. So we had to stand out somehow. And one of the ways we decided to do that is obviously do a very, and we don't have massive marketing budgets, but do a very sort of controlled exercise in going out to events, working with PR at the same time and wrapping it all together and then tracking it back to activations. And it was very interesting. We started tracking, and Emily and the team who's here, we were tracking this, and we've seen complete correlation between events and stuff back into actual bookings onto the platform. And brands who we now work with full time, I remember talking to them at an event or whatever, and it then came back. So I think you can do it. It is a little bit difficult in some places to be precise about it. But if you take it, as we tend to, key event moments, so whether it's Cannes, whether it's here, whether it's Mexico or whatever, whichever shows you're going to, you wrap the PR around that and everything else. And then in between those events, you probably have things like awards and other things you want to do just to keep the awareness out there. We've certainly found that has been incredibly successful for us. And we've kept the voice out there because we're not naturally a platform that everyone automatically thinks about. And we have to keep that top of mind element. And it's worked. And but it is, you've got to be very logical about it. I think back to Lydia's earlier point, it's not really about how much coverage, it's about when it's covered, what the coverage is about and what stimulates it. We did a press release a couple of weeks ago about some stuff on some of the programmatic options we're now doing, and that suddenly we got a load more interest from that. I can actually track that back. So that's powerful.
I mean, do you think we're going to see more of this scientific approach to B2B PR? I mean, client tracking, it's definitely, I personally think over the last 20 years, that's been some of its failure, that it doesn't have the same ability to track. But the way Paul's approached it, I guess we're going to see more of that from clients.
Yeah, and I think when you have a really engaged leader of a company as well, and they are able to actually track, that is, for us, that's brilliant feedback. When you're working with a multinational corporation with masses of sales teams, you don't necessarily get that feedback. So I think there will be tools that will be developed, hopefully, to actually track that in a better way going forward. I think but it's great working with somebody like Paul, but you get that. And you hear that. And we've had clients before who've tracked against coverage, literally against, and they could see the volume of inbound inquiries and they tracked them against coverage in Digiday at the time. And they could actually see those peaks and troughs. Again, they were at a smaller stage of their development, so they were able to kind of lean across to the next desk and get that data from the sales team. I think that that changes when you start to kind of grow and have multiple markets, multiple sales teams. So I think, yes, there is a potential for somebody to develop an AI tool that could help you to actually map that against events, against coverage, against awards, different elements.
Definitely. We've got a few minutes. I don't know if you want questions, but if anyone's got any questions, have a think, or I can keep asking questions myself. But can I ask you both then, that B2B is boring, no it's not, you say. What is your favourite B2B campaign, B2B PR campaign, and why? Paul?
I'm going to be completely selfish and talk about our pizza one because the pizza one just keeps working. So, but I think the key thing is if it works, it has the same impact. People have a personal connection with it, a human connection with it, rather than something that's just come from a press release, and that's what matters. And we've seen that in our experience. So that's the one we love, and I'm sorry to be self-centered about it, but it's the one that works.
No, we love it too. I think, so there's a couple. I'm going to do the self-promotion thing as well. So, and then I'll mention an external one. So LiveRamp, we developed a campaign for them called Meet the Revolutionaries. And this is an example of working with industry influencers. We don't tend to talk much about influencers in B2B, but this is bringing together industry influencers who've been identified by our team and by LiveRamp as being interesting, doing interesting kind of things within the industry. And we interview them, and then we bring them together as well for events. And I think it's now in its third year. And that's an example of something that's really delivering for the client. It's giving them awareness. It encompasses the messaging that they want to be communicating, but it does it in a slightly different way that has impact. Looking externally, I don't know how many of you have seen the Canva outdoor campaign. I think that's been a great example of bringing some humour, doing something that's highly relevant. We've all, pressed on the make font larger and make logo larger and seen it kind of expand out this side of the template. So I think they've done something very human, very fun, impactful, and memorable. And I love Canva. I think it's great. So I think that's been a really good campaign from them.
I got to add one more, actually. There's a really great campaign that EY did with us, actually, at Davos. So they targeted everybody who was taking an Uber in Davos. And that had great feedback from a lot of people who were there, because we saw all the feedback coming through. And it was very simple execution, but you've got a small group of people in a Swiss town just going in Ubers, and the messaging was there, perfect for their audience.
And the right people. Do we have any questions? Not sure if we do. We've got a few minutes left. One just there. Is there a mic going around, or maybe you have to shout? Just there.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Paul.
Yeah. Just a quick question. If you are, for example, a small independent company and you do not have a huge budget to reach out to an external agency and all of that, how do you start building your own press contact list?
So I think the question was around, if you don't have a huge budget, how do you start building your presence?
Yes.
I think one of the first things is to look at your social media presence and think about, are you using it to full effect? So, and thinking about what connections you're making, what you're talking about. Is your social media reflecting the company and you as an individual as well? Because social media engagement tends to be much higher with individuals than it is with company pages. So use your individual profile and start there in terms of talking about your company, your opinions on what's going on in the industry, and thinking about how you're using it to build your personal network, and move forward from there. And then kind of, there are some great freelancers out there who can help you at that early stage. And, we also work with kind of startups, but I don't want to be self-promotional. But there are kind of, there are some really good individuals who can then advise you at kind of an entry level point. But think about what you're doing on your socials first, and also being at events like this, attending and networking will definitely help you then to build that awareness.
Paul, you've got 2 minutes left. What are your thoughts on this question?
I mean, I agree. I think that social media is really important, particularly this point about authenticity. Because if you start pushing out loads of content on it and it looks like a press release on LinkedIn, it won't get the engagement you need. And we've done a lot of work with LinkedIn. We do lots of activations on it, and it always works if someone has their own spin on it, and you can trust them to have their own spin on it and their own personality. And sometimes that's slightly contrary to the way people like to do B2B PR, because it's like, oh, we got to let go. But if you don't let go, you don't get engagement. It's that simple. So you can build very quickly for them. You look at things like HubSpot. HubSpot have done an amazing job on their stuff. Their LinkedIn profiles are off the scale in terms of their followers, but it does really work for their business. So I think that would be where I'd start, because it doesn't cost a lot to do there, and then you can build from there.
That's a great tip on which to end. So also, I'll be very promotional. Come and win. Come and win a free zebra at the Bluestripe stand just over here. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you especially to Lydia and Paul.